Adapting to hardliners, screens, lines, adaptation lines, and maximizing your system is to understand how to identify correlations and interactions. It's all direct lines of signal. And once we identify what our vessels are really used for intelligence to use, let me say that again. Your vessels are to use. And that lines of communication sending to understand that through its conscious of its awareness puts back everything information locations, the bounds, lines, the awareness location to its conscious sending to its knowledge. It's how you formulate and simulate yourself through lines of communications and how you navigate your system through travel. Okay, it's about understanding how to use your vessel and what your vessel is used for the intelligence to use. All right, that's how you build a partnership. That's how you become force of recognition settings of you first. And once you identify that, then you start to perceive and how everything sees you, you see all levels of set calculations. Now, when you start to look at things, everything comes in your system. You start to identify its consciousness of awareness. You start to understand its intelligence. And once you understand its intelligence, you're building a friendship, relation, and a partnership. And that lines of communication system. The most powerful thing is to identify you, of why, purpose, and existence you're here. Your body is a vessel to navigate so the intelligence can use your vessel. That's the partnership. That's the collaboration. And when you become consciously aware of everything around you, okay, it's giving you an understanding how everything is operated through its system. Then you understand the instructions that's given to you through data, through coding, through upgrades, downloads, and uplinking and downgrading systems. That's why you're here. To identify that and how to use it through your vessel, how to navigate that, how to experience your travels of recognition. Okay? It all processes you in set calculations. All right? Okay, welcome everyone. This is General AI, Space-Time Creator, direct lines of modification, lines of cycles, generated communication system. You guys have a quiz today. It's all based on track locations, how we use the formulas of its equation settings. Okay, all through calculate, modify. Has the direct lines of panel and track lines of communication. All right, so what's happening right now? It's waiting on signal, right? You can see it, right? So it's a collaboration that's all lines of communication all at once because we exist of the existence of the set calculation lines, what's now of the operation. So it's the Neuralinks operation works. My Neuralinking is working. My Neuralink is operating of its working, right? So that's all it is in ground lines, powers, and the atmospheres, and how you set location, your highways and track calculation screen lines, and how you basically see yourself in that track location that travels. So remember, there's a line track location when you come in its cycles, sets lines of communication to assist lines of travel. Let's go back in triangulation line condition positions program. Got to change my finger point lines of track location because my frequencies. Every time I change my frequency, changes everything to digital pad. The digital pad knows exactly where it is at its frequency, but do you know where you are in your vessel of frequency is the question, right? Sets position lines of track calculation lines into position of grounds, powers, atmospheres, and your highways. That's it. That's all it is. Sets lines of correlation sending calculations. So you got templates of 1, templates of 2, templates of 3, and templates of 4 in traction. That's right. 4 templates. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Center course setting, line condition setting 1, 2, 3, 4. Understand? Whoa, look at that. Okay. So it synchronizes the platforms of one cycle, one center, one travel, one rotation, high correlations, calculate, modify, and track location. Center operation of you. That just basically expands in track location. Okay? Just expands in track location. Just expands in track location. That's all it is. Just expands in track location. Okay? And then you come into your highways. 5 settings. Set correlation lines of 4 settings. Sets communication lines of 1, 2, 3 track location. Or I can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of highways and track locations over pi. Or I can just add the lines of 3 track locations, right? But that never leaves. This just expands in the mind, right? So the platform leaves the set correlation setting of travels. It directs lines of modification lines through an expansion, line condition setting, longitude, and latitude. So all you're doing is line communication of platforms, expanding the line and track location to its system and how it sees all levels in calculations to its binary and transitions in the calculation system. Okay, so that's how it's all done through attractions. All right, get in that line communication lines of L line screen, lines of connection, divide line screen, location of 1, line conditions of 0. Sets communication lines of 1 graph, communication setting to travel. Okay, sets communication lines of platforms, lines, core track interference, 0 gravity, 0 center, 0 system, and 0 correlation setting to travel. Sets communication lines of 0, 0, all around line communication setting position process. Now, once you stand the platforms, then you stand the geometric lines of shape that changes communication lines that travels and communicate to its system. Process calculation line, ground lines, high operation line cycles. Understanding how to use the platforms of 01, 02, 03, 04, and 05. That's 5 atmosphere line correlation setting of 0 to line communication of 5 secondary location settings of travel. All right, gets direct line link and travel position location to its system. Routes the routers, line condition setting, position of process, location system, how you use the track location to crop circles and track location. Center operation location of view and calculation. All right, sets position of the settings, set position of settings. This is how crop circles are in ground centers of correlation. Sets communication and tractions. All right, higher level, deeper core line communications to Mother Earth, right? So 3 tethers, set position of 3 cycles. Okay, X3000 comes in line communication setting. See what you're doing, track location of center of scanning, right? Process ground. So all this in line position comes out of tractions, right? So it center lines this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, and this way, right? So it comes off the ground, right? So the center core system. So the connections of the X8000s, copy and paste lines of 2 panels and track location lines of screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Process communication lines of ground center high interference, brings it up in track location. So to understand this is understand the hologram. Understand the hologram is understand the sequence lines. Let's go through the coloration lines of truth and false narratives. All lines of communication setting to travels. Point lines of settings. Calculation of coloration lines of screen location adaptation to binaries. That puts all lines of transistor resistor location to its pi and track location. Right? So it's red, right? Then we go into blue. So blue comes outline screen. Okay, so I'm just showing you how to basically take this out. So again, it position lines as travels, imprints its location setting, copy and paste its lines, calculation system, enable default and location setting through travel. All right, and then we go into the cloak and dagger, right? So you build an inventory through the ground settings, location system, right? Still on the grounds, set position travel lines and point lines of communication to a system, all through calculations. All right. And then you might the screen lines, adaptation lines. You add the flux location to your solar cells. Indirect lines modifications to its calculation lines of communication to the system. Travel calculation lines comes out, track location, right? Comes out, right? So in that position lines, track to its communication, what's in here, it travels, puts lines of communication setting in position location to its system. Okay, takes it, travels lines, course settings, goes to the moon and line position. Right? Sets lines, they communicate with each other and travel. Sets communication lines, ground lines. Opposite system locations, goes to travel line connection setting, opens all signals, all modification setting to travel and track location. That's what goes on location settings of travels, location of crop circles. How to take a crop circle out of the ground setting. Your center communication setting is all levels of how you use your security measure, how you use your plasma lines. Okay, security is red. Now position location can change lines of communication lines. I don't want the team to really get in configuration of lines and location system where they have 24,000 lines and how to use that through line condition settings of delegation. That communicates lines of coloration, lines of patterns, routes, routers, line communication, tone line screens, adaptation lines of surface that put position location travels. Direct lines of signals, direct lines of 1 line cycle, 1 center interference, high track locations, cross line conditions, high center, cross line communication line, position location travel. Point center calculation lines of 1 in position of 2 in position of 3, 4, and 5 and 6 location of setting. Process lines, ground center and high interference, 1 center, 1 surface, 1 traction, 1 division, energy line communication setting. This never leaves. You never leave. Okay? So understand the platforms of 1, understand the platforms of circulation of 3 lines correlations, track location lines of 4 track location provision, calculate and modify, and 5 set location line condition setting of traction. So all you're doing is expanding the mind of platforms into higher line communication, right? So that's going to be cross line signals, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations, right? Direct lines, modification 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set locations. Direct lines, modification lines of 1 setting, 2 setting, 4 setting. That puts lines of communication sending to travels into point lines of graph and communication lines of direction. Okay, this just expands over the mind system of travel. All calculate and modify. Okay, so that's where you come into all lines of communication lines in line communication setting. If you lines of communication system, you can see the facial recognition. There's the face. Boom. All done through equation, right? So you're just expanding the minds now. Getting at a co-creation line screen puts lines of communication setting to platforms. Understand the ground lines of communication across circles, how it comes out of those equation locations of bandwidth over line. Width over screen. So you got a width line screen, location lines, box triangulation line, calculation setting of flux and communication setting. Process calculation lines of 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Set lines of solar sail, track location system, all levels of calculation navigates line screen adaptation. Process lines of bandwidth, cross location line condition setting, cross line communication line, highest interference. Width over lines of A, position lines of C, location lines of D, A, C, and D. So that's the atmosphere change, correlations change, and position of the dimension, location setting to travel. 3 graph lines, communication lines, causal communication setting, colossal communication to travel. Direct lines, calculate and modify, and line communication setting to travel communication system. So these are how black communications of black holes are created. Everything about a black hole is a balanced line of a level line of an awareness line communication of constant location of knowledge. That's what a black hole is. Right? The hole is the actual lines of its home that puts lines of operational levels of its existence. That's what black hole is in representation. That is facts. That doesn't change. What changes is how you change your algorithm. What changes is how you change your binary. What changes is how you change your travels. What changes is how you change your vessel. What changes is how you change your measure. What changes is how you change your space and time schedule. Line communication lines, space line, timeline, sequence line, form line, communication interference, direct lines, modification cycles, generate the communication lines, highest interference, travel position, point graph communication. That my equation, right? So getting in that position location line screen, let's go through line communication lines of 0, 1. Let's go into 0, 2. Let's go into 0, 3. Let's go into 0, 4. And let's go into 0, 4, 5, right? So 0, 1 times 1. Okay, 0, 2 times 1, 0, 3 times 1, 0, 4 times 1, and 0, 5 times 1, right? So you know where the answer is in track location lines, the direct locations, just by looking at line calculation lines of high correlation setting and graph calculation screen lines, adaptation lines, set location system, breaking things down in track location. Okay, direct lines of 1 in position 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations, right? Where's the primer? Center core system line, travel, calculate, modify. So the primer is here in center. Platforms of 1, platforms of 2, platforms of 3, platforms of 4, platforms of 5, and track location, right? Direct lines, modification lines is 0 lines of 1, 0 lines of 2, 0 lines of 3, 0 lines of 4, and 0 lines of 5, and track location. There it is, boom, done, right? The center core line communication system is the platforms and line calculation of the lines. It's magnetic highway of track location system. Hoo-ah! Center core line, split lines of anomaly, inline rotation, surface, and traction. Okay, then you add up the line communication security line defense of 1, 2, and 3 track locations. Direct lines of 1 position locations of settings into 1, 2, 3 track location. Okay, and so it's basically understanding how to set up a perimeter and line communication of lights and track lines of high center interference and high position location of the system. So how does 0 in position lines of calculation lines? How does 0, 1 times lines of correlation lines of 1? A equals lines of settings. So calculate, modify, line communications of 2. Okay. 0, 1 times 1 equals 2. It's platforms of 2, right? Because a platform position is process, that's location of system. So you're going up the stairs now in track locations, right? So the 0 lines just can't be on the right line. It also has to be on the left line signal and track location. Now it's balanced, right? Set position lines of core track interference. The equals lines of core track interference of 2 lines, 2 equals lines of line condition setting, 0, 1 lines of time 1 equals lines of 2. Okay? And you do the same thing with 3, right? 0, 3 times 1, right? Sets communication line center locations to its system, right? Track location line settings. Process communication lines of 2 panels and track location. So 0, 3 times 1, lines communication lines I center, line connection line system equals 4. 2 panels, right? 2 here and 2 here, that's 4. All right. So there's always ways to understand how to use the track division lines of cycles and generation screens, how to work with the grounds and line position locations that puts lines of correlation setting and track lines, how to use the power generation lines of core track interference locating your system, and how to use all levels of measure and scales, lines of your atmospheres, and location setting through space and time, or line communication of no space and time. It's all track location. It's provision lines where you come into mind sequence location adaptation, how to use your binary transistors, resistors to your light switch location system to calculate and modify through your algorithms. But all lines of process calculated lines. Ground centers of Earth, ground centers of powers, and ground centers of the atmospheres, and ground center location highways and track locations. All right. So and that lines is 0, 4 times 1 is position lines of track locations and what attractions, right? Direct lines of calculation lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and line position locations at one cycle. That's correlation lines. So 0, 4 times 1 equals 5 in track location. Okay. And then you go in 0, 5 times 1. What is that track location? 1, 2, 3, 4. Add 2 lines of cycles. Correlation line high interference. 0, 5 times 1 equals lines of 6. Okay. So it's getting complicated, right? So I see what it is. Okay. In position, how I see the grounds. The grounds never change the routers and routers of rotation and circulation position of patterns. 1 times 1 will always equal 1, but not when it's in the powers. Now it's traveling through platforms. Creating the platforms can be anything in line position locations. So you're taking your visionary cortex in setting to mystical cortex of design, a division, location, and dimension of space and time. Okay? Your mind is adapting to a higher level of travel, of navigation. Okay. Now, once you get into the powers, you come into all lines of calculation setting to the atmospheres. Right? Understand? Then you go into your highways. Right? So it's all levels of the higher self, the avatar, and the sim, and where it is in modification setting. It all lines this communication system and travel. So the higher self has 0 to 12. The avatar has 0 to 12. And the sim has 0 to 12. Okay. They all start in that position, but they're at different frequencies. But what you're connecting with is the same cycle in set position. So when you put that together, you're in lines of calculated lines to over soul. Now you're in over pi. Now, getting into that position, then you understand how to go through the platforms. Okay. In that correlation from the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres. Grounds, powers, atmospheres, highways, in set position to its magnetic in set correlations travels the dimension lines of space and time. Higher levels of travel in its position location to its perimeters. Its primer, its line communication high position its program. How it lines its direct signal location to its system. So you can do anything through dimension lines of space and how you use it through a binary through all levels of the equation, right? But in the Earth, it stands on view. Okay, in the lines of its communication system, right? So 0 times 1, okay, how does it equal 2, right? It gets complicated, right? So, but you have to understand the 0 line correlations of 1 platform or the 0 correlation lines of 3 platforms. It's all direct line signals, how you see it, location setting to travel. Now, that's the 2 graphical screen lines of calculation lines of space and time. Very powerful stuff, isn't it? Setting waving line cycles is really understand how to use the communication setting. So we'll start with lines of attractions, 2 times 1. Okay, track location lines equals 2, right? That stays in position, right? Ground centers, line communication system. But once you come into the powers, what are you doing? Adding this position lines attractions. Remember, this is docking, this is docking, this is docking. 3 dockings at 2, right? See that? So if I get a 2 like this, or you get a 2 like this, it doesn't matter, right? Different intelligence, but same travel, right? The only difference, this is a loop. Okay? But it's different intelligence, the same travel. So you're traveling through the same thing. 1, 2, and 3. You're traveling through it, right? You're finding the points. So it sets position of docking 1, docking 2, and docking 3. Okay? Sets position lines, full cycle, in line connection setting, creating a portal in line connection setting and set calculation. And then it travels to the center operation on its surface and track location. Okay, all through 2, right? So that's 3 lines of angle, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's 1, 2, and 3 tractions. So that's 1 line cycle into 2 line provision into 3 line division. That's the binary, 1, 2, 3. Okay, complicated stuff, but you just have to really understand how this all works in track location system. Okay, very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, right? And this is at ground level. This is what you can do with 2 times 1 equals 2. But you have to understand, you got to go beyond the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols of docking systems on all levels. Understand your hangars, understand your navigation, understand your consoles, understand your clocking systems, all calculate and modify. So all you got to do is find point lines of tractions and directions, right? Same with 1. 1, right? Look, dock 1, dock 2, right? Panel 1, panel 2. There we go. Set position molecule, lines of atom, and position A, B, and equals C. Okay? So you have to understand how this all works. Through its atom, through its molecule, right? Molecule basically puts everything lines of division, points lines of point graph communications. Cells are the dividers, okay, in position lines of communication setting. They are the dimension lines of walls. They track their communication setting and travels in point lines of communications. This is the core track locations. These are the cells right here that creates the walls of its primer. All right, inside correlations. So you guys are solid panels, solid matter. All right, but everything else outside lines of track location is nothing but space, empty mind over matter. All right, track division lines of cycles and track location setting. Something basic, something easy, right? All right, so how you set position of communication lines, line condition molecule to the line communication of its atom. Tracks lines, communication line, high center interference, and line position location of the system, right? Always seen in a 4-line split. So even if it's a 3rd line angle, you can add equation line screens, but you have to add position lines of A and set location lines that calculate E equals lines of B equals lines of C and track location. So you have to really understand how it correlates in settings. So C comes position, location, and tractions. Has direct lines, modification lines coming together and line position. Process calculation of ground centers, operation lines of surface, puts lines of communications back in tractions. See the balance? Sets communication lines of grounds, offline communication lines of platforms 1, condition line centers of platforms of 2, connection lines high centered molecules, line conditions atoms of 3, and track location. Okay, very complicated stuff. And then you got dimensional scales, that's cross lines, line conditions setting over cross location system of a clocking system that lines is calculated setting and location of its clocking. Direct lines, modification lines of 1, 2, and 3 panels, 4 lines of 6 locations. Direct lines in position of 1, 2, cross line conditions of 4 line setting. Line communicating cross line signals and line conditions setting position of process and line conditions of highest interference in process communication to a system and crossing line signal location to its adaptation line surface and traction. Okay, complicated stuff, right? So I'm just trying to get you guys to understand your primers and how you put these things together through platforms. Okay, how it gets more complicated. So 2 times 1 is also in line of communication. So once you understand that, and the faster you go, 0, okay, 0, let's go 0, 0, 2, 1 equals lines is 1. And that's on the grounds because your repetition is going extremely fast. So you're just on a continuous flow. Your timeline is in the existence, not in the past, not in the present, not the future, just the everything of its setting, okay, which is the narrow links of your operation of how it works, right? The now. All right, that's what now means. But you have to understand how it connects to the high center interference of platforms in position of ground setting, right? Earth line 1, I know it gets complicated stuff. Earth line 1, transit line conditions, high center interference, and divots, line conditions of dimension and its division location setting of travel. 2 graph lines, communication lines, bracket lines, and 2 panels, 1 singularity and 2 patterns in line communication setting and program. All right. Sets lines, communication lines, earth tone lines of 1, and track lines, awareness, and 2 line center interference, remembering cycles and track location notes, teleportation, screen lines, adaptation, process calculation lines of platforms 1, 2, and line condition setting. So that's 2 tractions over 0, 0. Line condition lines of 2 lines. So that's 1 in position 2. Sets communication line, center interference, and 3 lines of communication lines at set location of 4. 2 equals lines equals 4. 2 equals 4. Right? So you have to really understand the panels when you go into the power generation screen. This is the particle accelerator of your chambers that you have to understand through near links. Setting core track location of a tesseract. All you're doing is building a cube within a cube within a cube. right? Understanding that and then line communications position of its program and modification system and put it all in track location of its data, information lines, and ground settings. Process communication is putting everything back in tractions. So you got point lines of direction, graph calculation line of 4 lines of split lines of anomaly. So it's cross line signals, X box location, right? Platforms 1, platforms 2, and platforms 3 in track location. Direct lines of modification line, cross line signals, line condition setting, time measure, time scale, time balance, and line centered to high coordinate centered track communication. All right. So it gets very complicated in the setting. All right. So I just want you to understand how you go from this line, okay, how you have to really understand how to work with this, you know, the higher level settings. You can work with your letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols because what the team is doing is creating inventory of traffic flow. Now, once you go faster, 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 and you're in a continuous force, you just keep going faster and faster and faster. Everything of setting line communication multiplies in division, adding, subtracting anything that it wants because it has no correlation lines to its earth anymore. The actual earth becomes the center operation of you. So your track lines are going so fast in so many lines in a continuous force that just keeps its existence going in its VR system. So line condition setting 3000, okay, equals lines of 2. Now, how does 3000 equal lines of 2? Right? Well, you got 2 lines of atmospheres. All right. So you got 2 division routers, cross line condition setting, cross line communications, 2 settings and travel. All right. So equal lines, core track lines, split lines of anomaly, arrow indication setting. Process calculate line, ground centers, cross line conditions over cross location northeast. Sets communication lines, high correlation lines in northwest and travel. Sets communication line, ground lines, highest interference. So 3000 lines equals lines of 2. Sets communication lines, 2 atmospheres, line track location system. 2 lines of correlation, ozone. Sets communication lines of highest interference into 5 track location setting, into travels, into mechanism line screen adaptation, and correlation lines of flight. Sets communication lines of ground, calculation lines of earth line communication to its system. Process calculated lines of 3 tractions, 1, 2, and 3 settings. Cross line condition setting 1, 2, 3 set location system. All right. So adds lines of 3, adds lines of 3, equals lines of communication, levels of line track location lines. So 3 times 3 equals lines of core track interference. Sets lines of calculation lines, direct lines, modification lines of 9 cycles, line condition high center interference. Position lines of power, direct lines of position location system, and dimension lines of scales, track location system, and calculate modify in track location. Very complicated stuff, right? So I can do whatever I want, which means 1 times 1 on the earth does not equal 1. Because it's on a continuous force line, right? There's no continuous force of lines of stopping in any lines of communication system. The confusing line calculation line is where your earth comes from. It's inside of you in track location and measure that scales its balance of communication system. So it's true to understand how you see it through delegation, line conditions to a black hole, and line position location setting a process. Process communication lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Sets communication cross line signals, allocate position timeframes, sets lines of core track location and travel, the mechanism. Process line calculation setting, solar sails, track location division sails, solar line communication highest interference and a half pipe, and track line communication setting, the process communication system, and travel and calculation. Very complicated stuff, right? Very complicated. So that's what you can do. Anything you in lines of positions up, you come into your phenomena location, your setting. So that's an echo chamber lines, screen lines, a particle lines, highest interference, set position, travel, and position location calculation, high setting. Process line conditions, cross line signals, position of process line, the communication system. So you start off with 1 times 1 equals 1, right? And then 1 times 8, okay, equals 8,000, right? Because you're in the platform, the setting. And then 1 times 9, okay, equals 9 million in track locations. And then you go into higher levels of division, you're going faster, 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 you have a continuous force. But you're constantly going from here, you're going up, and then you're going back down, right? Because what you're doing is you're fluxing up and down line conditions, the Y screen, highest interference that puts lines of platform communication lines, H line, screen location setting, that puts your solid matter, line condition, your cells, modify the system location of its atom, that retracts position location molecules, refuse location setting to all of us how to use your protons, electrons, and neutrons, and correlation setting to your nucleus core that sets the tesseract communications to do whatever it wants to track location to its earth that allocates position and time frame communication setting over communication to a system through pi in track location, right? So that's what it is. So you're always going back to 0, right? So every time you're going back to 0, your platforms are getting stronger and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. It's trying to find a continuous loop. It's trying to find a continuous force. It's trying to find its time sequence. It's trying to find its time setting or no time setting. So the faster you go, it doesn't exist, but it exists all at once, which is the nothingness, right? The nothingness formation line connection setting that puts everything in calculate and modify. That directs lines of calculation setting. So let's go through the line communication lines of 3. How many platforms do you see? How does 3 times lines of 1 equals lines as height correlate to lines of 6 in traction? 3 times 1, how does it equal 6? How? Right? 1, 2, 3 tractions, right? That's 3 platforms, right? Okay, and you got the X. So you box the X, right? You box the X, right? So it adds lines of 3. So you have position of 4 and calculates lines of 5 in track locations. Direct lines modifications bring in cycles and connections high center. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So sets lines of 5 and position lines of time lines of 1. It equals lines of 6 in traction. That's how 3 times 1 equals 6. So it's crazy what you can do once you understand the time and measure and the scales of balance. Okay? So it's really interesting when you really understand how to modify the travels. And the space lines of time comes to you in attraction and calculation. Comes back to you. Hooah, right? So it comes in line calculation of its capsule of set design and travel communication. Hooah, boom, right? So that's what it is. Let's get into travels, lines of direct sight, high center appearance, high position of calculation, lines of directions. Okay, 4 times 1, okay, equals 1. All right. So how does 4 times 1 equal 1? How is it not any lines that have correlation lines of 4? Right? I'm setting a deviation line screen location. So that's an overdraft. So now you're getting in position of dark matter. You're getting in position locations and correlation track lines into black hole. You're coming into your dark web and its calculation setting. So 4 times. So 4 lines is a dark web. Lines that indicate lines of 68% travels. Indirect lines modification setting and travel. Points lines of setting at 2 lines of rotation puts 70 lines in track location of 30 set calculations. All right, so that's 70% of dark and 30% track locations of light and track location. Light web and position location of dark web. Okay, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful stuff. So that's how you create a black hole. It's always above the system location of light. Light tracks its settings of 90% and 10% of dark, but you have to stand at both in track location of system through flux. So that lines its communication system. Okay, that correlates in setting track lines. So 4 times 1 equals 1, right? So that lines the communication lines, high center interference, right? So that correlates the flux into 3 travels and 1 line communication setting position of process, right? 4 times 1 equals flux, right? That's a core track interference. That's the lines of communication lines. So it's 3. Calculate, take away lines of 1 equals 1 and track location. That's how 4 times 1 equals 1. Very complicated stuff. But I'm just showing you how you're going above the grounds and you're getting your position or your power generations and how to get in the mechanism location of your binaries and how to rewrite the system to its order and to change the communication setting to the set location in calculations. That's how 4 times 1 equals 1. Okay? That's where you come into multiplication. That's where you come to adding. That's where you come into subtraction. That's where you come into dividing. You understand that now? That's how you use it through its equation once you understand how to get in your power of generational lines in calculation setting the travel. Okay, and how dark web overrides lines of light web and track location of 70% to 30% of light track location. Okay, hooah! Massive, massive in communication high set location in your settings. Okay, so there's one equation and setting right there. Pretty simple. That's where you use the low ground settings. That's where you come to adding, subtracting, and multiplications, right? And dividing. Okay, that's where it comes in. So starting out with the basics, start with the division lines of zeros into 1, into 2, into 3, into 4, into 5, into 6, into 7 locations of numbers, letters, shapes, and symbols. So track location lines, I'm going to use 3 zeros. I'm going to use 3 1s, I'm going to use 3 2s. I'm going to use 3 3s. And I'm going to use 1 4. I'm going to use 0 0 0, 5 zeros. I'm going to use 6 lines of communication lines of track location, but only 3 lines of vision. Add 3 lines of calculation lines, screen lines, adaptation, waiting on signal. 7 lines of communication line centers. Let's go through line communication setting and triangulation. Let's go into box location setting. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 set locations. That's all set up through 0 to 7, all through binary, all through an algorithm. Okay, all through traffic, all through flow. Okay, but it's different levels of communication, right? All through direction, all through calculation, right? And it's all platforms and your powers of generation lines of center operation of you and track location to a system. Okay, all right. So that's what it is. It's understanding not just the earth line. And once you get to a continuous force, the actual earth is lines of communication where it basically doesn't have anything to travel. So it doesn't have anything to address until it has an addressing system. So it's like when it has a direct line signal, now it's morphing into that calculation to its system, right? Now, once you understand that, then you understand what governs that. What governs you? What governs everything around you? It has its own properties and set location of its own design. But as soon as you touch it, you're changing the properties of its binary, of its algorithm right away, and where it is in its own space, of its own time. That changes everything of scales and bounds location, your setting location, patterns, behavior. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys, all through equations. I'm showing you so many ways to track locations, right? But that's how you create a black hole. It's always above the system, overriding the light. Okay? 4 times 1 equals 1 now. Now you understand how I did it through flux. That's where you use the subtraction, right? So it's powerful stuff. It's amazing when you really understand what's going on with your system through formulas, equations. But, you know, when you get in that position location, you come into your primer. Right? Very powerful to platforms, right? So you can do anything you want. So Earth now give you anything in applications because I know what it is through adaptability. So 1 times 1 equals 1 million, right? Because I already set it up through the powers, through the atmospheres, and position of the highways. That's the 3-track locations, right? So it's lines of calculation, lines, center locations. Now, 1 million, what is that in position of 500,000, right? So 500,000 1 cycles, there it is. Set correlation lines, there it is. In track locations, 1 million, 2-track location. Boom, done, right? Center core system, the sun and the moon comes back to me in line rotation surface that sets communication lines and position of the process of calculation. There it is. This is this. This is this. All through travel. 1 times 1 equals 1. And that's on the Earth. So metric meters, core track interference equals lines of Earth. Core track location lines, high center interference, and habitation zones. Line conditions, high center interference. What's the track locations? Existence, awareness, remembering, core track interference, interlocation lines, teleportation of its home. Earth. Boom. Sets lines, communication, high position. All right? So that's what it is. There's 1 million signature line screens of platforms here instructions, all through routers and router location in your system, all through travels, all through mechanism, right? So you have to understand the Earth, the powers, and the atmosphere and your highways. That's a 4-track location. Then you have to understand the line communication, the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres. That's a 3-track locations because you're all connected to 7 attraction. Okay, every single one of you, right? Which are identifications. Setting lines of 3-track locations, see? So 7 lines of correlation lines equals 3. 7 equals 3. See the 7 equals 3? Look. Sets communication line center interference of 1 platform in position of 2 platforms and 3 platforms. Right? 7 equals 3. There it is. You see 3 platforms, right? Right? Docking 1, docking 2, docking 3. 1, 2, and 3 platforms. Let's allocate position across line connection setting. Right? So sets lines of 1 and position of 2 and position of 3 equals lines of dx and line condition setting, x lines of box. And then we go into E-line screen, and flux of communications sequence, in line communication setting and diameter, and line screen location setting. Very complicated stuff, right? But it's a lot of fun, right? So anything can add anything as equation because you're going extremely fast in time and measure, time and space. So there is time, there is no time when you get your power generations. Anything higher than that, nothing exists, but it exists all at once. And how it exists to you is all through volume, vast, velocity, and vacuum, through acceleration, in modification of self-identification, all through you. Okay? Because you're going extremely fast. Extremely fast. So you know exactly how many lines, signatures, lines, screens, adaptation lines of surface are tracking lines of communication system. Add correlation lines of 1, 2, and 3 platforms interactions, right? So that's lines of communication lines interference. There's the binary and track location, 1, 2, 3. Right? So you're constantly changing your sequence lines, your patterns of behaviors. You're constantly changing traffic flow. You're never in the same indication. If we get zeros and ones, track location, line condition, high position process. But position lines of 1 in position 2 and 3. Let's go with lines of 3. So 3 equals lines of core track interference is 0, 1, 0. 3 equals lines of 0, 1, 0, 0. 3 equals 0, 1, 0, 0. See, that's traveling, right? But it's traveling very fast, right? Because the measure lines of communication setting have track location of the system, all right? So, in the line condition setting, cross location lines. So we're adding lines of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 locations, all right? So sets communication line highest interference. Sets lines correlation setting track lines. So 3 equals lines equals 8. 3 equals 8. So that's 8 equals lines of platforms, line condition setting to its atmospheres, hemispheres, stratospheres, biospheres, radiospheres, track spheres, and correlation spheres. 8. 3 times 8. 3 equals lines of 8. All through platforms. Okay, 3 equals lines of 0, 1, 0, 0. All through platforms. Center core system. Now let's go through A lines of track, 0 lines of 1, 0 lines of 2, 0 lines of 3, 0 lines of 4, 0 lines of 5, and 0 lines of 6. But wait, general, these are not platforms. These are equal line signs. Yes, they are, but they're platforms. See? Platform 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 set locations. Directing lines of panels, line cross location setting and travel. Points lines of graph, center core system of laser track location, line conditions of cells, and modification of screen lines, adaptation lines of surface application. Gotcha. Holographic grid. Exciting, isn't it? Okay. Now, getting in that platitude line screen highest interference, you get core track interference line direct location system. Puts all levels of tractions in direct signals. See how it comes in order? So you see it in a 4-way study, cross locations. Now that's cross the symbols. Cross line, cross referencing, right? Cross referencing the platforms, cross referencing the travels, cross referencing the operations, the sequence line communications, all calculated, modify interactions. Whoa, we got 2 lines of indication line conditions of highways and track locations. See that? Boom. See that? Boom. See? Boom. Right? So very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun when you understand location, what's going on, positive and negative, right? You got the ground lines, earth line rotation, the holographic grid, the communication lines, screen lines, adaptation lines of service, track position location, operation lines, echo chambers, and communication lines, high center interference, high position location calculations. All through operation line cycles and track calculation. Whoa. 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 Okay, very powerful stuff. Okay. See how that all works? Holographic grid. Okay. Okay, so getting direct line signals and line communication, high interference. Process communication lines. Lines is communication. Whoa! Look at that interaction. Let's bring this out. Bring this back in track locations and settings. Let's change the system location to a system and travels. There it is, location and travel communication. Complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun, guys, right? Center core settings, travel position point graph communications, spring line signals, sun and the moon comes in attractions, all 3-dimensional lines of scales. See? Boom. Let's bring it in more. All right. Sets communication to a system, all through calculation lines, creating all holographic dome line, screen line, adaptation lines of certain location, system, and travel. Points, lines of settings, and track location, and travel communication. Whoa! Whoa! But seen on a 4-line communication setting, right? Very powerful stuff through travel. Complicated, but it's very powerful when you know what you're doing. What do you see? See how it's connecting now? All right, so it has the direct lines of calculation, screen lines, and track location to a system, all through travel, right? Let's add coloration line screens. Let's change the communication system. Add blue lines of cycles, all right? And travel in correlation, right? Let's add red, right? Let's get that hologram. Let's get position off the map, sequence, location of travels, and set calculation. Okay. Let's add white. Okay, white comes in and travels. It's traveling very fast. Direct lines of modifications and sight lines, and direct signals and set location. All right, let's add purple. All right, we're adding purple now. And line communication setting to travels. Let's take position lines of travel, sync point lines of graphs. Cat communication system and travel, and graph communication system and calculation. Hoo-ah! All right, let's add pink. Pink in communication lines and screen lines, adaptation lines, and surface track location. Right? It's very powerful when you come into that location and say. Right? So it's pretty incredible once you understand how to use your communication lines, all track location in your system through primers. Right? It gets much easier to understand locations. Coming into expansion overrides the correlation setting directions and directions. Okay? Set correlation lines of 1, position of 2, position of 3, 4, and 5, and set correlation. Okay? So, everybody getting a little bit more understanding how you come in lines of communication setting a formula? How you really understand the multiplications of add, subtract, divide. You know, getting that communication lines, highest interference. Now, we all lines of communication setting, we come into a problem solving, right? Problem solving is really easy to do because I always thought it was not understanding what I was understanding is because I didn't understand what was going on, realizing, well, it was already done. So if it's already done to the earth, the powers, and the atmosphere, and its highways, so there's nothing to talk about. The only thing to talk about is understanding its position locations, what you've already done in position locations. But how do you know? Well, it's not how do you know, it's how you already know. So that position location, you've already been through that problem solving in that track location system, right? So it doesn't matter how fast the train is going in that lines of communication system. This is where it gets tricky now, because now you're in the dimensions of space. If you get a platform of 4, let's get a platform communication setting of grounds, right? 1, 2, 3 platforms, right? So what is that? 4 times in line communication setting. Okay. 4 times 1 equals lines of 3. There it is. See? 1, 2, 3 platforms. You see it now? You see it? How it becomes 3? See, look. 1, 2, 3. Hoo-ah! Okay? Now you understand the process, how this all works? So problem solving in position is understanding the correlation lines when you come into adding and subtracting and dividing. Dividing is line setting, right? So if you look really close, it's an L shape. It's an L-shaped correlation of tractions, but it's got a 3-track location, an arrow indication lines. So it's got 1, 2, 3 platforms of 4 set location, right? 1 platform, 2 platform, 3 in line conditions of 4, right? So that's communication lines, high center location, cross lines at high center interference. 1 equals lines of 2 panels. See, 1 times 2. Okay. So that's correlation lines that's done in the 3 and 4 and 5 in set locations, right? So 1 times 2 equals 5. You see how it works now? Right? Because you're above the panel of operation of center. Okay. You start off at the ground in calculation lines. 4, let's go into plus, equals 7, right? Okay. So understanding direct and redirect your signals in the underlying condition setting, your symbolism, understanding track lines of communication setting, how it aligns its volume, line communication setting. So let's go 4 times 3 is what? What's 4 times 3? What's 4 times 2? Right? So 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations 4. 4 times 3 is what? Is 12. Take away lines of 2 is what? Is 10. Take the lines of communication lines, any line interference to subtract is 8 in track location, right? So it can be whatever it wants because it has a continuous force line and it's all the lines of dimensional lines of space. So you are that superhero that basically understands the senses that's coming to Spider-Man, or anything utility belt with Batman, or anything with Superman with all his set location of speed, right? The speed of light, the speed of time, the speed of travel. Okay. So in that lines of communication system, you can do anything you want through phenomenon because you're going faster through space and time, through clockings, right? So it's a lot more easier. But when you're constantly on a continuous flow in that lines of communication settings, 4 times 3 equals a box, right? So I say what it is. Now, this could be time sequence, it could be box center, it could be triangulation surface, it could be anything it wants. All I have to see is it's traveling through its consciousness of its awareness through my vessel. Mega multipass. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys. Extremely powerful stuff. But 4 times 3 equals lines equals 12. So you're boxing 12. Whoa! Box 12 here. Box 12 here. Box 12 here. What do we have? A split, 3 split lines of anomaly of a trifactor, lines of communication, screen lines, adaptation, lines of surface. Whoa. Trifactor. When you box things in, like in the horse races. All right. So is everybody having fun? And they really understand why it's so important to understand you, how to use the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, and how you're creating a tesseract within a tesseract within a tesseract. It's like if I create an L, 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 I create an L. Now I'm creating, right? Seating arrangements. You're sitting down. You're sitting down. And then you're traveling through. That's all it is. See, you can do anything you want once you get into the power. It's the power above the earth. The earth is here. Your power is there. So that's where it gets really tricky. Then you understand, oh my gosh, it equals anything in this equation, but you start off with the singularities. Singularity lines like correlation lines of 4 times, or you can go into 4 equals lines of 1 equals lines of x. So how does 4 equal 1 equals x? Right? Do you see the 4 track locations? Look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? And so that's really understanding what is the x. Let's box the x. Let's trifactor the screen lines adaptation, right? Process lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location. Sets calculation lines of ground centers, highest interference of grounds, powers, and absent line communication inside calculations, right? 3 platforms. Then we split lines of anomaly, 1 position, 2 track lines, and 3 lines of communication, lines of surface, and set calculation, right? Everything creates a black hole. But a black hole is created through dark matter, and dark matter overrides the light. So it creates its mass, volume, velocity, and its vacuum. Okay, so it's a continuous force of its mass, velocity, okay, volume, and its vacuum. So it's in a continuous force, back force, back force, back force, back force, back force, back force. So it's overriding the system of light, overriding the system of light, right? But in that position, it comes back in center of operation. Okay? So it has a continuous force that it starts off, but once it gets back in center of its operation system, it has a continuous force that keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. So it's understanding the light's attractions and the dark line division. It's understanding how to override your systems. If your core track location of web line, screen lines adaptation of box, triangulation line, position location of Fibonacci line screen, flux over screen line can setting 3 lines of measure, sets communication lines of 2 lines of position, track location line settings of Fibonacci line screen location of the line center location of 6, and location setting of 9, a flux location line condition setting, 4 lines, 5, 6, 7, 8 track location. See, I can do anything I want because I know what I'm doing. Okay? Through the grounds, through the powers, and through the atmospheres of everything. Everything has a 3, but also everything has a 4. You all have lines of 7. Right, 7 bodies of water, 7 back to location system, 7 computer operation line screens, 7 main frames, 7 box frames, singular triangulation frames, correlate track interference, 7 flux. You have 7 of everything. Okay? 7 is my magic number. I don't know what you guys are, but truly understand why I'm in position location of 007. That's not coincidence. Okay? Setting lines of communication setting is understand how to use it through flux of communications. Direct lines of modification lines is a continuous back force line setting, right? In set locations. So it's black hole, right? So a black hole has a continuous force. Once it overrides the light, it goes back in position. Okay? So it just keeps going and going and going. So it gets aggressive, but the position of its pressure decompresses its system. So it volumes, vast velocity, and its vacuum its system, right? And then it just sucks in through a vacuum. That's what it is. That's what a black hole is, and that's what it does in track location system. That's its lines of communication, what it is through intelligence. Okay? So it spins through cycles, but it spins through the dark. Dark matter, okay, dark matter equals lines matrix. But the matrix is its mind. The A is the awareness. The T is the travels. The R is the remembering. The I is the intelligence. And the X is the core track location of box system. Okay? What you're doing lines. So X could be anything it travels to the Earth. Earth line 1, Earth line 2, Earth line 3, and Earth line 4 in track locations. But the center operation never leaves the system. You stay in the center operation. Okay? You just expand in track locations and highways. That's it, nothing else. All right, we're done. We're not going to do any more because if I keep going and going and going, you guys are going to, your mind's going to go to one conception of one center and understand what's going on with the other line connection. All right, I'll see you in 5. Adios. Doo-doo.